In the far northern lands, where winter ruled like an ancient king and the sun barely rose above the mountains, a boy named Erik grew into a man. His village was carved between frozen rivers and endless forests, a place where survival was not a choice, but a daily battle. Children learned to hunt before they learned to speak. They learned to fear nothing, because fear had no place in a land where the cold alone could kill you. Erik was different from the others. The boys of his village dreamed of hunting elk or leading raids on nearby settlements. Erik dreamed of something greater. He would sit on the cliffs overlooking the sea, watching the longships return from distant lands. The warriors came back with stories of deserts hotter than fire, cities made of marble, and battles that shook the earth. But one story captured Erik's heart more than all the others, the story of the Varangian Guard. The Varangians were not just warriors, they were legends. Northern men who sailed thousands of miles to serve as the personal guard of the Byzantine Emperor, a brotherhood bound by an oath stronger than steel, a place where loyalty was sacred and betrayal was punished by death. To join them was to carve your name into history. When Erik turned 16, fate opened its doors. A group of northern warriors passed through his village on their way south. They carried axes marked with runes, shields painted with wolves and ravens, and scars that told stories no tongue could speak. They were heading to Constantinople, the greatest city in the world. Erik did not hesitate. He said goodbye to his mother, embraced his father, and stepped onto the longship. The sea was cruel, the storms unforgiving, but Erik's resolve never wavered. He was chasing destiny. Weeks later, when the golden walls of Constantinople rose before him, he felt as though he had stepped into a dream. Towers touched the sky, its markets overflowed with spices, silk, and gold. The air smelled of incense and sea salt, and at the heart of it all stood the great palace, home of the emperor. There in a courtyard surrounded by marble pillars. Erik took the Varangian oath. He placed his hand upon the hilt of his axe and repeated the ancient words spoken by generations of warriors before him. I swear loyalty to the emperor. I swear to stand when others fall. I swear to protect this empire with my life, until my last breath leaves my body. From that moment, Erik was no longer a boy from a forgotten northern village. He was a Varangian, a guardian of emperors, a shield against chaos. A warrior whose courage would be tested in ways he could not yet imagine. Years passed. Erik fought in deserts where the sun burned like fire. He marched through mountains where the air was thin and cold. He guarded emperors during ceremonies, battles, and nights filled with whispers of conspiracy. His axe became feared. His name became known. And yet beneath the armor and glory, he remained the same boy who once stared at the sea, dreaming of a life beyond the snow. But destiny is not always kind. And even the strongest oath cannot protect a man from the storm that waits for him. Erik's storm was coming, a storm of betrayal, blood, and a journey that would push him to the edge of life itself. The mission was supposed to be simple. Too simple. After years of guarding emperors, marching with armies, and surviving battles that swallowed entire legions, Erik expected something greater. But orders were orders, and the Varangian Guard obeyed without question. A Byzantine ambassador needed escort through a remote forest region known for rebels, bandits, and desperate men. Erik and a small unit of Varangians were chosen. They were experienced, disciplined, and feared. No one doubted they would complete the task easily. But from the moment they entered the forest, something felt wrong. The air was heavy. The trees stood unnaturally still. Even the birds refused to sing. Erik felt the tension in his bones, a warrior's instinct honed by years of surviving the impossible. As night fell, the unit made camp. The ambassador paced nervously, muttering prayers under his breath. The Varangians sharpened their axes, joked quietly, and tried to ignore the feeling that the shadows were watching them. Then, without warning, the forest erupted. Arrows rained from the darkness. Dozens, maybe hundreds. The Varangians leapt to their feet, forming a shield wall around the ambassador. Fire lit the treetops as torches were thrown from every direction. The enemy was everywhere, unseen, silent, deadly. Erik roared orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. Shields locked, axes raised. The first wave of attackers crashed into them like a storm. Steel clashed. Men screamed. The ground shook beneath the weight of battle. But then came the moment that shattered everything. One of their own, a Varangian Erik, had fought beside for years, turned his blade against them. A traitor, bought with gold. His strike cut down a brother, breaking the shield wall and opening a path for the attackers. The betrayal hit harder than any blade. The Varangians fought like cornered wolves, but the ambush was overwhelming. One by one, they fell. The ambassador was dragged away into the darkness. Flames spread across the forest floor. Erik fought until his arms burned, until his vision blurred, until the world became nothing but blood and fire. He struck down the traitor with a single blow, but it was too late. The unit was gone. The mission was lost. When the final enemy fled into the night, Erik stood alone among the bodies of his brothers. The silence that followed was heavier than the battle itself. Snow began to fall, covering the dead like a shroud. Wounded, freezing, and barely able to stand, Erik knew he had only one choice: to walk north, to return home, to survive long enough to warn someone, anyone, of what had happened. The journey that followed was a nightmare. He walked through forests where the trees whispered like ghosts. He crossed rivers half frozen, the icy water biting into his wounds. Wolves followed him for days, waiting for him to collapse. Hunger gnawed at him until he could barely think. But something inside him refused to die. A spark, a memory, the oath he had sworn, the faces of the brothers he had lost, the image of his village, the mountains, the sea. Days turned into weeks. Snowstorms swallowed him whole. His armor grew heavy with frost. His breath turned to ice. But he kept moving, step after step, driven by a force stronger than pain. He was no longer marching as a Varangian Guard. He was crawling as a man who had lost everything except the will to return home. And somewhere deep inside, he felt it. A warning. A whisper carried by the wind. Something waited for him in the north. Something dark. Something final. After weeks of walking through snow, hunger, and silence, Erik finally reached the valley of his childhood. The mountains rose like giants around him, the same mountains he once climbed as a boy. The sea glimmered in the distance, cold and endless. The moment he felt hope, the kind of hope only a man near death can feel. But hope vanished the moment he saw the smoke. Thick, black columns rose into the sky. The smell of burning wood and flesh filled the air. Erik's heart pounded as he stumbled forward, his legs barely carrying him. The closer he came, the clearer the sounds became. Screams, steel clashing, the roar of flames. His village was under attack. Raiders from the northern coast, brutal men who lived by plunder and blood, had descended upon the settlement.
Houses burned.
Livestock scattered. Women and children ran for shelter while the village warriors fought desperately, outnumbered and exhausted. Erik did not hesitate. Though his body was broken, though every breath felt like fire, something inside him ignited. A final spark, a final purpose. With a roar that echoed across the valley, he charged into the chaos. The raiders turned, shocked to see a lone warrior rushing toward them, a man covered in frost, blood, and scars, his eyes burning with fury. They did not know who he was. They did not know what he had survived. They only saw death coming for them. Erik's axe became a storm. Every strike was fueled by the memory of his fallen brothers, the betrayal in the forest, the oath he had sworn, and the love he carried for the land that shaped him. He fought like a man who had nothing left to lose because he didn't. The raiders fell before him, one after another. Some tried to flee, but Erik hunted them down with the last strength in his body. Others tried to surround him, but his axe carved through their ranks like thunder splitting the sky. But even legends bleed. Erik's wounds reopened. His vision blurred. His breath grew shallow. The world around him began to fade, but he refused to fall. Not yet. Not until the last enemy lay silent in the snow. And when the final raider collapsed, the valley fell quiet. Only the crackling of burning wood remained. The villagers gathered around him. They saw the boy they once knew, now a warrior carved by fate, a man who had walked through death itself to return home. They lifted him gently, carrying him away from the flames, away from the blood, to the hill overlooking the sea. It was the place where Erik had played as a child, where he had dreamed of becoming a warrior, where he had first imagined a world beyond the mountains. They laid him on the grass. The wind brushed against his face, cold and familiar. The sky above him was painted with the colors of dusk, gold, red, and deep blue. Erik looked toward the sea. He could almost see the long ships returning. He could almost hear the laughter of his brothers. He could almost feel the warmth of home. His journey was over, his oath fulfilled, his story complete. Some say the Varangians never truly die. Their spirits travel with the waves, carried by the wind, whispered in the halls of warriors yet to be born. And so Erik, son of the North, became a legend not because he lived without fear, but because he walked through fear and never surrendered. This was the last journey of a Varangian, a warrior of the Emperor, and a son of the North.